Morning everyone. In this video we're going to revise the events and quotations from Chapter 2, Search for Mr Hyde, in Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde. There's a link to the slides below if you want them. Let's get started. Chapter 2 starts with Utterson in his bachelor house. He opens up his safe and takes out Jekyll's will. It tells us that he took charge of it, but that he had refused to lend the least assistance in the making of it. And when he's reading it, he notices a strange clause. It says that if Dr. Jekyll dies, all of his possessions were to pass into the hands of his friend and benefactor, Edward Hyde. The odd part, though, is that it says in the case of Dr. Jekyll's disappearance or unexplained absence for any period exceeding 3 months, the said Edward Hyde should step into Henry Jekyll's shoes. Utterson describes this as an eyesore. It offended him. He suspects something dodgy's going on, so he decides to go and talk it through with his old friend, Dr Lanyon. We're introduced to Dr Lanyon, with Dr Lanyon sat alone over his wine. This was a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman with a shock of hair prematurely white, and a boisterous and decided manner. He springs up from his chair, and he gives Utterson a double-handed handshake. Utterson notes that the two of them and Jekyll are old friends. But Lanyon, talking about Jekyll, remarks that he sees little of him now. Henry Jekyll became too fanciful for me. He began to go wrong in mind. And then he describes Jekyll's work as unscientific balderdash. Utterson asks about Hyde, and Lanyon says that he's never heard of him. So Utterson goes home. And after he goes to bed, Utterson has a bunch of nightmares. He dreams of that human juggernaut trodding the child down and passed on regardless of her screams. He dreams of a vampire-like figure watching over Jekyll in his sleep, a figure to whom power was given. He dreams of a figure crushing a child and leaving her screaming at every street corner. And when he tries to get a better look at the figure of his nightmares, it had no face, or one that baffled him and melted before his eyes. After he wakes, Utterson decides that he needs to meet this Mr Hyde. Utterson begins to haunt the door from Chapter 1 and says that if he be Mr Hyde, I shall be Mr Seek. And after waiting a while, he notices a small and very plainly dressed man. They have a conversation where Hyde is described as almost like an animal when he shrank back with a hissing intake of breath and he snarled aloud into a savage laugh. After Utterson has left the situation, he starts to tell us about Mr Hyde and what he's like. Amongst other things, he describes Hyde as pale and dwarfish. Again, that he gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. He has a displeasing smile. He has a murderous mixture of timidity and boldness, and Utterson has an unknown disgust, loathing and fear about the man. The man seems hardly human, something troglodytic, and has Satan's signature upon his face. Utterson walks around the corner from the door and gets to Jekyll's front door, where we meet Poole, the butler, for the first time. Utterson goes in and he notes it as being the pleasantest room in London. But on this night, he seemed to read a menace in the flickering of the firelight on the polished cabinets and the uneasy starting of the shadow on the roof. Poole tells Utterson that Hyde shows up every now and then, but he mostly comes and goes by the laboratory, so the servants rarely see him, though they all have been given orders to obey Hyde. Utterson leaves and notes that Jekyll was wild when he was young, and thinks that there must be blackmail going on. Perhaps that Hyde is the ghost of some old sin, the cancer of some concealed disgrace. But then Utterson starts to worry for Jekyll's safety when he notes that if this Hyde suspects the existence of the will, he may grow impatient to inherit. And that's all for Chapter 2, and that's all for this video. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching, and happy revising.